neighbour just before the Tyrone Gilbert murder. The photo was of the blue Audi used in the killing. The evidence against Joyce, Amos and the rest of the Gooch gang was substantial, and one by one, they were all arrested. Tony Weatherly questioned both Joyce and Amos for 3 days. He cannot be identified as he's currently working on a covert operation.
Colin Joyce came over as a very chatty, very affable person, very charming to a degree. Then as soon as the tapes go on, he then became very guarded and made no comments to every question put to him.
These are the actual audio tapes from the police interviews.
On the 15th of June this year, a male called Gooch was shot in Anson Road in Longsight. What can you tell me about that?
No comment.
It was clearly put to him that this was a planned attack. He had seen Gooch driving the vehicle and that he was responsible for pulling the trigger.
His vehicle that he was driving was purposely run off the road. He was targeted. Why would he be targeted?
No comment.
Joyce was equally uncooperative when questioned about Tyrone Gilbert's murder.
Were you in one of those vehicles at the time Tyrone Gilbert was shot?
No comment.
Do you know who was in those vehicles?
No comment.
Were you one of the gunmen?
No comment.
With Joyce remaining silent, police began interviewing Lee Amos. Would he crack under the pressure?
What, if any, involvement did you have in the murder of Gooch?
Lee Amos just remained completely silent throughout the entire process. He sat and stared at a piece of paper on the desk for 3 days.
Where were you at the time that Tyrone Gilbert was shot dead?
There was no reaction from him at all, no facial expression from him, other than at the point where I asked him to discuss with me the murder of his brother.
I know that in 2002, in February 2002, you had a brother, Stephen, who was shot and murdered in Ashton-under-Lyne. Is that correctly?
At that point, there was a reaction from him. He was clearly uncomfortable in discussing that with me.
And we have information and know that you swore revenge upon those who were responsible. What can you tell us about that?
But again, still made no comments when any questions put to him, refused to communicate whatsoever, and remained this disciplined person staring at the desk.
Joyce and Amos's silence didn't help. They were both charged with murder. In an attempt to reduce the risk of witness intimidation, the decision was made to hold the trial 35 miles away at Liverpool Crown Court, and it would prove to be one of the most remarkable trials ever witnessed.
Well, you couldn't write it, could you? You couldn't ever expect that that was actually going to happen.
Colin Joyce, Lee Amos and 9 other members of the Gooch gang were now awaiting trial for offences ranging from firearms possession to murder. But ensuring their convictions would, in itself, be a complex challenge. That's because convictions wouldn't be possible without witnesses, and witnesses in gang trials are very hard to come by. 50,000 pages of evidence were scrutinised by a team of prosecution lawyers, but the most difficult task was persuading people to talk.
Most witnesses go through a variety of emotions. You know, they start off feeling confident, then they feel a bit nervous, then they feel anxious, and it's almost like a process of worry. So we made a commitment to these witnesses that we would be with them throughout this trial and that we would be there basically 24 hours a day. Support ranged from going for a cup of tea with them, sitting with them, to full protected status where their identity has changed and they are moved away. Whatever it was that they needed to help them through that stage, this group of people had already killed 2 people, and you can't lose sight of that when you're protecting your witnesses.
The most important witnesses were those who were closest to the gang.
We heard evidence from people who'd been associating with the gang members for a period of 4 years.
Some of them admitted their own criminality, the fact that they were engaged in gang activity, drug dealing, possession of firearms.
One witness told police about gang members coming to their house, packaging drugs in their kitchen and passing around handguns. Another told how they'd been asked to store the Honda Legend car in their garage in the days leading up to Tyrone Gilbert's murder, and had later been ordered to burn the vehicle's documents in an attempt to destroy evidence.
I think for some of these witnesses what they did was life-changing. I think that some of the witnesses were stuck in a cycle of crime in which they were being used by the gang members and they couldn't get out of that cycle.
The threat of witness intimidation was very real.
One of the defendants managed to get hold of a mobile phone in his prison cell and telephoned one of the key witnesses and made a plea to him not to give evidence.
Narada Williams was the man who made the call. Amazingly, the witness managed to record the conversation.
Between me and you, I can't take this prison no more. I've been in here a year, bro, and if they sentence me, I'm never gonna come out, bro. I can't handle it.
He was obviously shaken up by it because he believed that they knew where he was by the fact that he'd received the phone call. I remember him saying that he thought at one point they might be outside.
Help us out, man. Help us out. I'm begging you. I ain't got nothing no more. I got nothing. Only thing that I can think of, and I know you're gonna disagree with me, is just say, yo, I tell you the truth. I've been lying. You can't get thrown in pen. They can't throw you in pen. I'm telling you that now. They can't throw you in pen.
Well, you couldn't write it, could you? You couldn't ever expect that that was actually going to happen. And I've not spoken to that witness since, but he got through it.
Despite the intimidation, the community had had enough. With witnesses now pledging to give evidence, dawn broke on the day that Greater Manchester Police had feared might never arrive. The trial of the Gooch gang began. In September 2008, a heavily guarded prison van set off from Manchester across the M62 to the Crown Court in Liverpool.
We were concerned that gang members may try to effect their escape from custody, and that's why I introduced the high security and armed escort between the two cities.
The convoy would become a familiar sight. The trial was to be the longest and the largest in the history of Greater Manchester Police.
The trial itself was like no other trial I'd ever attended. It lasted nearly 6 months, and the twists and turns that went on a day-to-day basis were unbelievable sometimes.
The atmosphere was electric. I recall it very well. There was over 100 people in the court itself.
We had everything from anonymous witnesses to people whose voices were disguised, screens for many. We had covert routes in and out of the court. We had all kinds of things in place.
The gang caused upset from the start.
They shouted abuse to witnesses, shouted stuff to the prosecution. They didn't have any respect.
They love to see people acting weak around them. They like to feel the power.
Every day is like something inside burning up. To see they just sit there laughing.
It was like a playground for them.
The intimidatory tactics failed.
We went into the